Hello all, I am Komal, I'm from India. So I'm here to talk about BDD, Gherkin and Specflow. Would really like to thank Tech Now for giving this opportunity. Read that there are 170 plus speakers there, and I'm really privileged to be one of them. So thank you for the opportunity. So let's just begin with the Gherkin and Specflow. So this is what we'll be covering, what exactly BDD is, why BDD, how BDD is done, what are the practices of BDD. So if you want to start using BDD in an organization, what are the practices that you must follow? Uh, then what is Gherkin and how exactly Gherkins play a role in BDD? What are the BDD tools? And one of them is Specflow, which is used for .NET. So we'll be touching upon that also. Right. So here we go. What is BDD? So first of all, it's a behavior driven development. It's derived from the TDD, that is test driven development. So what exactly the definition of BDD is? So instead of me trying to explain what is BDD, here is what Dan Knott says. So Dan Knott is the one who came up with the idea of BDD in 2006. So he says behavior-driven development is about implementing an application by describing its behavior from the perspective of its stakeholder. So that's what the core intent of BDD is. Being a non-engineering or engineering person or domain expert, you have to think all the requirements in terms of stakeholders, what would be the system's behavior. So all the requirements that you have would ultimately tell about the system's behavior and scenarios that it follows. So what BDD does is it fosters the collaboration and communication between tech and non-tech people. So you'll be having round of clock discussions with the team members if you're using a BDD. And conversations really play important role in BDD. So this case says if you are not having conversation, then you are not doing BDD. Why she says so? Because there are some practices from BDD which can be followed independently without having a conversation, and that's not the intent of BDD. You must have the conversation. So what exactly the problem is? So customer and PO sits in the problem domain, and dev QA architect sits in the solution domain. So they all speak a different kind of language, right? And there are chances that there is a gap because they don't speak the same language. If you try to explain a PO that you have to write the 10 statements or 10 stored procedures, he may understand the depth, but he probably won't understand what exactly you're trying to say. And that's why there is a gap and there is importance of shared vocabulary between all these people. And BDD gives you the shared vocabulary that's important to have, because that can be considered as source of truth. With current approach for developer, the source of truth would be code, and for PO and customer, that could be the requirement document. But once you have a BDD, the source of truth would be the scenario that explains the system of that explains the behavior of the system. Uh, so here's what let's say is about conversation. So she says having conversation is more important than capturing conversation, is more important than automating conversation. So that's how the conversation is important. So you have to have the conversation in the first place. So in one of the presentations, she says if you're working alone in your project and you want to have a conversation, you can have conversation with rubber duck on your desk, but you should have a conversation. That's really important. And so if you work in a silo, being developer, once you understand the requirements, you'll probably start them capturing in your code or unit test cases by doing the automation. But before that, it's really important to have the conversation with PO and try to understand the what behavior is expected in terms of system, in terms of the end user. So this is what the traditional development approach is. Here, everyone talks with each other through the documents. So when customer and PO needs to have communication, they have the requirement document maybe. When PO has a requirement with him or her, they write down the stories. And if they are following the agile, we'll be having a backlog refinement session where team discuss about the user story, and they point the user story. So the communication medium is still the user story, and then the work in the silos maybe for uh, developer for code and unit test, and QA for testing strategy, and then you have the final product. So we are changing little bit. So BDD changes little bit of this, and we'll get to know how exactly BDD uh, differs from the current approach. So before that, we'll understand the terminologies that are used for BDD. So if you want to start a BDD, uh, these are the things you can try for. So discovery, formulation, and automation. These are the three important practices for BDD. So user story, once you have a user story, so user story can be something, a feature that needs to be developed newly, or maybe the existing feature that's already there. So in the discovery phase, all the people from, let's say, domain expert, the engineering team, the QA and dev representative will attend a discovery workshop. You can time box that workshop with 15-30 minutes there. They just come together and talks about the user story. And once the PO has explained the user story, Q and dev can ask the question, what if that, how exactly this, how to, what would we have, what can be alternatives. So these kind of discussions, as name says, it's all about discovering what scenarios are we missing. Once the missing scenarios are found out, try to include them or exclude them, but then you have different type of scenarios with you. Once that is done, then there is a formulation phase where the aggregate scenarios are converted into Gherkin syntax or given then that using the plain English that uh, domain expert plus engineering team can understand. So that once the formulation is done, then comes the automation where developer and QA can work on the aggregate scenarios. They'll have their code unit test cases and automated test, and the working software would be ready. So the discovery, formulation, and automation, these three are terminologies for practicing BDD. So how exactly now the approach changes is the customer and PO is having a discussion, requirement discussion. Once the discussion is done, PO will have a set of user stories with him, and they'll have a discovery workshop. It is also called as three amigos because the domain expert, the someone from development, the representative, and QA, the three streams are joining there. So it's a three amigos where they discuss about the scenarios. They find out what exactly is expected in that feature, what would be the behavior of that feature. Sorry. So let's take an example of a clothing store for which the software is being used. So POS is when a customer returns an item, you should do the refund. So that's the user story. Then a QA may ask, what is the timeline for returning? Then you may say, oh, that's a good point. It should be returned within 30 days. So invoice date should be less than 30 days from current date. Then dev may ask, what if the receipt is not present? And PO wouldn't have thought about it, or they wouldn't have the so PO may say, okay, this is in particular that I haven't thought of. I may communicate back with the customer if what to do when the receipt is not there with the customer. And there could be a lot of scenarios around this. So that's what the intent is, to have identified scenarios. In this case, the scenario which says when you have a receipt and the date is less than 30 days, the refund should be initiated. And if it is not less than 30 days, the refund shouldn't be initiated. So these are two average scenarios which have came out of the discovery session. And then there is a formulation. So these aggregate scenarios will be converted into given then statement. So who'll write it is really depend on the team. Anyone can write it, but you just have to have the agreed upon that given when then. And once the formulation is done, there comes automation where developer and QA can take those formulation and start writing their code for unit test case or for automated test cases or for coding itself. And then we'll have the final product, which is ultimately capturing the scenarios that we have discussed. And so everybody is on the same page. Everybody has expecting system to work based on the scenario that they have added and not anything else. So that's how it differs from the traditional approach to BDD approach. The conversation here is really important. Uh, when you have this kind of conversation, you really get to know each other's responsibility in a detail. So when a PO says about the clothing store software, and when Devin QA tries to explain the scenarios, he may understand, okay, what exactly the depth, how much work is expected, and it could take time, or you can narrow it down by deciding some features. So that's how it plays an important role, and it really fosters the collaboration and communication, and you try to understand each other's role. And sometimes in Triamigos, roles get reversed also. Sometimes QA can give you the solution and they can ask you for something. So that's how the communication can. So ultimately, the software is made up of people. So conversation would make them a better, and excellent communication is equals to excellent code. I have read it somewhere, but that's really true. When you have excellent communication, you try to capture all those in your code, and your code will be excellent altogether. Yeah, so that is what the BDD is. Now, what is working? So in human concept, we always talk about the cause and effect. And for software, it's all about input, process, and output. So Gherkin connects between these two. So for in the Gherkins, we have features given when then. These are the keywords. So as featured, as it says, feature is the title of the scenario. So one feature may require multiple scenarios, or may not. Then we can have a given statement that is the initial context for that scenario. We may need multiple preconditions, multiple contexts, and we can join them using and. Then when it's something which triggers the event, and then is the expected outcome. So you can join multiple givens or multiple thens or whens by and statements. So that is what the Gherkin is. It's given when then. So before that, when there is a user story, when there is a user story, PO says I want a user to log in after successful authentication. Uh, Dev may start thinking in terms of code, what exactly the objects would be needed, what exactly the conditions, how I can display a message. So it's all about the coding that they're thinking. QA may immediately start thinking upon the scenarios that what should happen for the valid and invalid password. So before working, it's all like everybody is speaking a different language and everybody is in their own jargons. And what happens after working is we have a user story with us. I want a user to log in after successful authentication. That's user story. And all these three have agreed upon this, that this is the feature, this is the scenario that is, this is the behavior of system that is expected when login is created. So if a user is a system user, which means the registration is already done, and he tries to the password, username and password, if there is a successful login. Everybody just speaks the same language. We will consider this as a source of truth. So writing Gherkin is altogether a different topic, because when you start writing it down, you may feel it is difficult in the first go. And writing correct Gherkins is really important. You shouldn't include the fields like when I enter username in username field. So you shouldn't include your UI fields here, because it's the acceptance criteria, it's the scenario. What if your UI changes from login name to from username to login name or login ID? Then that scenario won't justify the system anymore. So that shouldn't include the fields from UI, or it shouldn't include date if there is a timeline associated. So instead of that, you can say 30 days, 60 days, 1 month, so that it gives the clarity when you read the scenarios. So these are some tools that are used. So for .NET we have Specflow. For Ruby we have Cucumber. God serves a lot of frameworks. Then we have Jasmine, Behat, and Concordian. So these are some rules, some tools. Sorry. Uh, and one more point: if you're using one of these tools for the automation testing, then that doesn't mean you are doing BDD. And so that's how it differs. So you can still use Specflow and won't follow the three amigos or the conversations that BDD is trying to say. So Specflow or any of the tool is not equals to the BDD. These are altogether a different methodology. So for the Specflow, there is no Git package for Specflow. You can get it from the extensions. So it gives you the feature file and step definition file. So this is what the feature file look like, where you write successful login is your name, and the feature would be login. And this feature login, you can have multiple scenarios like unsuccessful login, successful login, login with password updated, or something like that. So you can have multiple scenarios in a feature. So given I am on a home page, and so here it comes and because these two are preconditions to execute the particular scenario. And when I enter a username in username field and I enter the password in password field, then I should be redirected to dashboard page. So the example you're seeing here, it's to cover the multiple uh, combinations, right? So if I want to perform two combination, I should write this entire scenario once again with XXX and YYY in username and password instead of them. Instead of that, I can pass them as a parameter, and that is what this table does for us. So if you want to use the examples, you need to have the outline here. Sorry. So here is the step definition file. When you write a feature file, you can write and create a step definition file. So this would be the step definition generated by Specflow, and then you can write down your own logic here. So thank you all for joining. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. Thank you again, Techno, for giving me this opportunity, and really looking forward for the event. Thank you.